Okay, let's go on to the second question now. This time I'll be starting with you, David. How does your organisation help support the transfer, adoption and acceptance of new know-how into making the global food chain safer, while boosting investment in product innovation and delivering greater choice for consumers? So, a small task.
Let me give you a couple of examples. The Joint Research Centre actually hosts 6 of what we call the European Union reference laboratories. And these include, for example, the European Union reference laboratory for GM food and feed. And these reference laboratories essentially support the process of authorization of products and support the efficient control of compliance with EU methodologies in the EU. And I think one of the key things that the JRC is able to do is bring together a sort of an overview of the whole process of method development for detection and identification, validation, standardization, harmonisation, internationalisation of the issues and bringing in other parts of the world. And I think that with that broad spectrum of views, we play quite an important role also in helping our colleagues from EFSA in the eventual authorisation programme. So we're able to advise policymakers, as I say, validate and harmonise analytical methods which are used in the process of detecting various types of substances. I mean, I talked about GMOs, but of course we also look at, for example, in one of our reference laboratories, the heavy metals in food and feed, where obviously that's with an unwanted toxic constituent, and we contribute to the international bodies on food and feed safety to try and get more of a globally harmonised picture, which will therefore put the EU in a solid trading position. There's clearly a lot more work to do, but I think that the JRC sees this role of running the networks of laboratories, taking a role as part of the EU reference laboratory, but working with the laboratories in the member states to provide an overall network, to provide a harmonised capability across and a harmonised view across the EU as a crucial element in the eventual process of boosting innovation while maintaining food safety as required by the consumers.
Okay, then I'll pick it up from there. What about your organisation?
Well, I think from what we can bring in from EFSA into this process is really our network of experts, our network of scientists which we're having. As I mentioned earlier, we work together with about 1,000 scientific experts per year. And I think we have a twofold mechanism where we can facilitate this process in identifying research and using research and thereby increasing its acceptance. So, for instance, let's start at the end part. In order to identify research gaps, where do we have problems? This we do with a very broad consultation with all our experts. We ask them, where are the issues, what are the data gaps, where do we need methodology developments, and we indeed come up with very concrete examples, themed areas, which we then communicate to DG Research, and we're very happy that many of them are taken up, then actually used in a research project. Once they're used in the research project, a research project goes on, and there are some concrete examples. For instance, on nanotech, we asked to take this up on non-dioxin-like PCBs. So there are positive examples. One, these research projects have been done, have been carried out. We can then take these results and make them really useful in our risk assessment process so that at the end the risk manager really also benefits from this entire process. So twofold, we can identify research gaps while we work on scientific opinions, and we can use research results as they come out of the research projects, and we can then disseminate this within our network of experts.
Right. Mela, what about the producers in terms of contributing to the implementation of these new developments?
I think the food industry, of course, it is about competitiveness, Monique, you're quite right. We can be more competitive, particularly in two areas. One is new products, and another area is new markets. Putting new markets aside, let's look at the new products. We have quite a lot of possibilities to develop into new markets, and we're doing a lot of research. We run, or we either coordinate or partner several research programs that I mentioned before. There's the ETP Food for Life, which is a very important one for us. We're also involved in traditional food, True Food, Facet, which is flavorings, additives, food contact materials, Prometheus, which is processing contaminants. We're involved in a New Age project. It goes on and on. It's a long list. New Age is particularly interesting. It's about adding life to years, because we've already added the years to life, and now we want to make those years more worthwhile. So it's about looking at the elderly today, and thankfully they're becoming more numerous because they're all living longer, but let's try and make those years more active and more healthy. So that's another whole area we're looking at. We're also looking at the food that we eat every day, and to answer to Monique's request, and I think the industry's taken this very seriously, in the fight against NCDs, non-communicable diseases. We're working on reformulation, on this takes a lot of research. There's a lot of energy goes in there just to bring salt content down, for example. It's something that is very gradual. You can't do it overnight, because then you end up saying, oh, ooh, what's wrong with my product today? It doesn't taste like it did yesterday. So it's something everybody has to go there together. You have to do a lot of research to substitute these products, for example, once you start taking them out. So there's a lot of work going on. This being said, we're not doing quite as much as the food industry in the US is doing, or in Japan, or in other developing regions, in fact, of the world. We should be doing more. But then we have this series of obstacles that I mentioned before. So it's kind of a vicious circle.
And Monique, I mean, assuming that you see your organisation as actually having a role to play in to use the words of the question, transfer, adoption, acceptance of new know-how into making the food chain safer. Do you see that you're in business to do that, or are you really just watching other people whose job it is to it?
I would say that, I mean, it's not my job to boost innovation for the sake of it. It's my job, or the job of my colleagues and myself, to be the watchdog and to keep the pressure. And if I can take a quote from David, he said the consumer doesn't want it because he doesn't understand it. And in fact, we as a consumer organization don't want it as long as we have the impression that the professional supplier doesn't understand what he puts on the market. That means if there has been no proper risk assessment on nanotechnology, there has been no proper risk assessment on chemical cocktail effect, there has been no... And you know, the financial crisis is the consequence of a fact that somebody who sold an investment product to a consumer without understanding what he was selling to the consumer. I mean, this is just to give the full picture, because we don't only work on food, of course. But that means that that's our role, to really put pressure on decision makers, on the industry also, to improve.
Right.
And we are, of course, in favor of innovation, as long as innovation delivers to consumers.
Okay, well, that brings us on then to the last question. One I think we've got... Yes, we've got time to do that, provided you're reasonably swift. And that is, how do you think Europe is doing in terms of keeping its citizens' food supply safe? Bernard, are we doing well or badly?
No.
Mindful of the German E. coli outbreak.
Yes, no, I'm here as a representative of EFSA, not of the German government. No, I would say I think we've made great progress in the last 10 years. Which doesn't mean that we should not endeavor to improve every time. I think if you look back, separation of risk assessment and risk management at the beginning of the century in the white paper was a very important step. I think EFSA has been created then in 2002. We have started our part, what we could do, our part of the work actually. We have in the meantime really come to full speed. We are fully established in the meantime. We produce several hundred opinions a year on specific questions. So I think we make a very good contribution, and we see that this new, or I would say that this new system of risk management and risk assessment separation works very nicely from our perspective. So I think what is important to say really that regarding the science, to come back to this, we really need to ensure that the calls are as good as possible targeted to the requirements. Of course, we are very egoistic. We look from our perspective, but we like, of course, to have them targeted to the requirements of our scientists, so that we make sure that really the European consumer at the end is benefiting from it.
Right. Yeah. Okay, Mela, how are we doing? Well or badly?
I think I'd like to repeat what was said. I think there's been extraordinary steps have been taken over the last 10 years. I think we're really going from good to better. And I have no doubt we will go from better to best. And I think that EFSA is doing a wonderful job, along with the Commission as well, both as risk management and risk communication, risk analysis. I think more communication perhaps would be helpful, but I see no reason why EFSA should not become the world reference, not just the European reference. I think I'd like to give, for 2 seconds, a little anecdote. I started in this job about, well, four years ago approximately, and day 2 I was a pentachlorophenol problem arose in guar gum. Now, I hardly knew what guar gum was, let alone pentachlorophenol. I really was. I was brand new, and the lady in my organisation who looks after these issues just went on holiday. So I thought, oh dear, what do? I picked up the phone, rang the Commission, and within a day, we practically had that thing circled off, stopped, identified where the product was coming in from, what was the danger, what were the lot numbers, where were they coming, where were they going to, what ports they were arriving in. It was extraordinary. I thought it was really quite efficient. I know we can do better. I know we can do more. I know we can work perhaps better with the member states, but really what we have today is already quite an efficient system. So I think we should really take the time also to say, give ourselves a clap on the back. I think the EFSA in particular has done a great job.
Okay, Monique, things are getting better. Do you agree?
Well, I must say that I always say that Europe is the safest place in the world when it comes to food. And I say that with pleasure when I'm in the United States, I must say. The last time I said that, it was on the 7th October last year, at the conference on food safety in Paris. Maybe some of you were there, and I got ill in the train, fainted, and went into the hospital. I had food poisoning, together with 8 other people. But I can accept that risk zero doesn't exist. So I would say, I think that we are really progressing very much, and that I think, well, we have to keep the pressure and improve. It's not because we are the best that we should stop there. But one other element, and we talked about this with Mela also, please don't forget also the part of consumer education, and we have our responsibility in this, is that many of food safety problems are linked to fridge management in your home, and that should not be forgotten.
Sure. And finally then, David.
No, I'm convinced also that we're doing an extremely good job on food safety. I mean, if you compare it with other risks, and if you sort of stand back and look at it mathematically, first of all of us, every time we get in our car, we do it in spite of the fact that there are some tens of thousands of deaths per year in the EU in road accidents. And we've got 20% youth unemployment in the EU. And if that's not a risk, then I don't know what is, because we can't go on like that. Nonetheless, having said all that, we must remain ever vigilant. You never know what could come round the corner. We mustn't be complacent, and we have to watch very carefully the question all the time, because it could suddenly, just like that, change overnight from one picture to the other. And we know that with risks. You can go to bed one night thinking everything's okay, and the next day you realise you've got a disaster happening. So remain vigilant. That is the message from me.
Well, 4 of you then, thank you very much indeed for that, for having answers to really quite tricky issues. Okay.